And when he was doing that, behind the scenes, he was designing his own EMS system. What he did is he hired an individual, a white male, that had did his internship at Freedom House. And he made him the director of what you have now is the City of Pittsburgh Emergency Medical Services. So he took the plan that we left on his desk and gave it to this gentleman. And in turn, what we didn't know at the time, because we were still operating as usual, he was hiring individuals from the suburbs. So you have an all-white EMS system coming into an urban environment to start a new EMS system. So Freedom House continued to operate during that time up until, I would say, October of 1975. And during that time, we entered into an agreement with the city of Pittsburgh because they removed their contract since they're starting their own system and said, okay, you will take all of Freedom House's employees. They will not have to go through any additional training. You will take the vehicles, the equipment, and it will be just a smooth transition. So here we are thinking, okay, we're going to work for the city of Pittsburgh. Unbeknownst to us, Pittsburgh EMS and the city of Pittsburgh reneged on that deal, despite the fact that it was in writing. The agreement said you had to take all of Freedom House's personnel, but nowhere in there did it say they had to keep you. So unfortunately, Pittsburgh EMS went on a very successful, what I would call, elimination process of taking the people and changing our shifts and putting us through different trainings and changing the training that we had already had in an effort to frustrate each and every one of us to say, okay, you all got this. I don't need this hassle anymore. Just to give you an example, myself, the very first person to do a tracheal intubation when I went to the city of Pittsburgh, I wasn't allowed to do anything. I was the third person on a two-person crew. I couldn't talk on the radio. I couldn't drive the vehicle. I couldn't examine patients. All I could do was observe, all in an effort to frustrate me to say, okay, I've had enough of this. As fate would have it, I went on a call with this crew that I was working with, and we went into a person's home, and the person was unconscious, not breathing, and didn't have a heartbeat. And the crew that I was working with, they didn't know what to do. They panicked. And they looked at the person that wasn't allowed to do anything and say, you take over. So once I started assigning duties, you start the IV, you put the person on the monitor, I'll do the tracheal intubation. And we subsequently saved this person's life, and that's fantastic. But it had to be kept quiet because I wasn't allowed to do anything. So from that point on, I had to make a decision. Do I continue to be this quiet, unnoticed person, or do I step up my game and be more outspoken and letting Pittsburgh EMS know who John Moon was? Because I knew at that particular time that the department wanted to get rid of John Moon along with the rest of the people that were there. And if you think about it, and I'm jumping a little ahead of myself right now, a lot of people haven't heard of Freedom House. The majority of the people I'm talking to right now perhaps haven't heard of it. And I understand that. And even though that saddens me, I understand it. Because the initial intention of City of Pittsburgh Emergency Medical Service was to get rid of all of Freedom House's people. So if you get rid of the history makers, you essentially get rid of that part of history that they made. So I understand why very few people have not heard of Freedom House. So it's my goal, along with hopefully once I finish talking to you all, that you will continue to get this word out there. And going back to my career at Pittsburgh EMS, and I want you all to know that you're not talking to a disgruntled, retired assistant chief of Pittsburgh EMS. I love the department. I love the people that work there, and it will always have a special place in my heart. But we were talking about a different time frame. So once I made up my mind that I had to step up my game, I became more outspoken. I wanted people to know who John Moon was. I challenged the crew members on their treatment of patients and things of that nature. So eventually, the department found out who I was, and I started getting promotions and things like that. And once I started getting promoted, I noticed something about Pittsburgh EMS, that it steadily remained predominantly white. Pittsburgh EMS went 10 years without hiring an African American. So I had made myself a promise that if I got into a position to change the trajectory of Pittsburgh EMS, I would devote my career to doing that. So once I noticed that the department wasn't hiring African Americans, I challenged the entire department on their hiring process. And that was met with the expected resistance. And I was given the opportunity to design the very first diversity recruitment program in the history of the city of Pittsburgh EMS. And I used the same format that Freedom House used. I recruited people that had no idea what an EMT was, what a paramedic was, had never talked to one. I was able to place them into a training program, have them get a salary to offset their training as an EMT. Once they completed their EMT training, they went into the paramedic training. I was able to get them to get a salary increase as a bonus for increasing your training. And I was able to get Pittsburgh EMS to hold job vacancies open until they got their training completed. So it was just a lateral move into Pittsburgh EMS. And that became the normal way that Pittsburgh EMS hired all while I was there. Unfortunately, once I retired, that's a different message unto itself. The department, unfortunately, went back to its own ways of doing things. You have to keep in mind that once the department first began, you brought a predominantly white organization into the from the suburbs into an urban environment. So they experienced culture shock. They were not used to dealing with people that looked like me. They came into an urban environment with a preconceived idea that this was the most dangerous place in the world to come work. So I'll bring my knife with me to work. I'll bring my gun, but I'll keep it in my car. The vehicles themselves had handcuffs. We were dressed the same as police officers. So it was nothing for a EMS unit to put its red lights and sirens on and pull a car over for going through a red light, because I got that authoritarian type mentality that because I look like the police, I carry on the same authority that they did. To offset that, the vehicles had 7-cell flashlights, not to find your way around in the dark, but to use as a weapon. Because I'm in this dangerous environment, you never know what can happen. Unfortunately, to add to that problem, the paramedics themselves were trained that you're only going to get domestic violence, drug overdoses, shootings, stabbings in an African-American neighborhood. Those people don't have heart attacks and strokes and diabetes and things like that. If you want to work on a unit to get a true medical call, you would probably be best served working on a unit to handle some of your affluent neighborhoods. So once I found that out, I challenged the training institution on their training method and got that revoked. There was also a rule, which was a state law at that time, that the only way you could become a paramedic or an EMT during that time is to work for a volunteer organization. I challenged the state on that and got that removed, that any person now in Pennsylvania, whether you have any type of training or not, you can just sign up for an EMT training program without any support from a volunteer ambulance service or volunteer fire service. I was able to get that removed because it impacted the diversity issue. So my career with the city of Pittsburgh primarily was designed solely on trying to keep the legacy that Freedom House created alive. I had a resolution introduced through council to have Freedom House's emblems placed on the side of every city of Pittsburgh emergency medical services units. That was good up until the time that I left, and once they changed new trucks and things like that, the vehicles went away. So Pittsburgh EMS right now, I spent 34 years there. And I love that service. And I'm no different than the average person. When I went there, I wanted to one day become chief of Pittsburgh EMS. That's what I was working toward. Unbeknownst to me, that was never going to happen because the department was designed to prevent that from happening. And I found out the hard way. I was in charge of everything, the total operations of Pittsburgh EMS for roughly about 15 years. Everything that went on with Pittsburgh EMS, promotions, hirings, recruitment, complaints, discipline, vehicle maintenance, community outreach, from everything that operated out of Pittsburgh EMS went through John Moon's office. And we had a promotional process that the next man up, when there was a vacancy, the next man up would automatically get it. That went on for 30 years, up until the time that the next man up was me. And unbeknownst to me at that time, I'm thinking, okay, I'm the next man up. I'm going to be the assistant chief of Pittsburgh EMS. And I was passed over for a promotion. And it was given to a white male that I had been his boss for 15 years. And I had to, in turn, report to him. And in turn, I was ordered by my boss to teach him all of my job duties and my job responsibilities, which in turn made him qualified for the next promotion up. Obviously, that didn't sit well with me, and I subsequently challenged the department on their promotional process, and you don't do that and expect to live a happy life. And so the last 5 years of my career at Pittsburgh EMS wasn't quite what I would have liked it to be. But once I found out what my overall purpose was, I had to accept the fact that I wasn't there to run the department. I wasn't there to be chief. My job was to make the job available for people to look like me that came behind me to get an opportunity to work in that department. I was there to break down strongholds and barriers and hurdles. And subsequently, once I accepted that fact, I went on this mission to do that. So during my recruitment hiring, a lot of changes occurred. Pittsburgh EMS itself for 35, almost 40 years, 45 years, have always had a white male as the chief. So in order for that to change, things had to change outside of Pittsburgh EMS. Pittsburgh actually voted in its first African-American mayor in 2021. He comes in, and he actually had to be, he was someone that I worked with on my diversity recruitment program. So he knew where my heart lied. So he comes in as the mayor and appoints the very first African-American to be chief of Pittsburgh EMS, an African-American female. As fate would have it, she's one of the individuals that I hired doing my diversity recruitment program.
I was just going to ask you about her because she came to your office and wanted to be right, and you kind of mentored her and how the process worked, and she did every single job and every single administrative parts of the job, working her way up.
Absolutely, absolutely. And she's the only person in the history of Pittsburgh EMS, despite being the first African-American and female, she's the only person, like you said, that has held every job position in that department, from an EMT to a paramedic, to a supervisor, to an assistant chief, to a deputy chief. Now she's the chief of the department. And she knows firsthand some of the struggles and the hurdles and the barriers that I had to overcome. So what she's done as a tribute to me is she's created a Freedom House EMT Academy right inside of Pittsburgh EMS. And she uses the same format to improve on diversity in Pittsburgh EMS, where she goes out and recruits people from the community. And I say that because as I look around today, I know diversity is one of our major hurdles in EMS, along with personnel. And what I would like to see is that EMS across this country kind of step up their investment into the communities in which they serve, because that's where your allies are. So it's easy to put a posting on Facebook or one on Snapchat or any of the other social media platforms that we're hiring. But if I don't read those and I'm not entertained by them, then I'll never know. So it's my heart's desire is that EMS systems across the country would go out into the community and interact with the community and whether it's teaching CPR or having job fairs and things, use it as a recruiting tool. And I think that'll solve two of the major crises that we have in EMS, obviously diversity, as well as personnel issues. So
let me on one point. So one of the initiatives for the state of Florida is to start MIH programs, community paramedic programs. There are organizations that have them, but it seems like you were the first ones to really to do that. Can we talk a little bit about those community paramedic programs that you guys started and go back to, because once again that some people can be a little suspicious about this change in how we're managing. Like, why aren't you taking me to the hospital? Why are you keeping me home? So we have those challenges. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your community outreach that you did for basically your own community and that community paramedic program.
Well, one of the things that I did initially as part of my recruitment is I actually went to community centers and community picnics, and I would set up a table with flyers and brochures, and I would actually have a vehicle come so the residents themselves could actually talk to the personnel. They could actually go inside the vehicle and see all the equipment that's inside of it. I'm a big proponent of exposure because that's where your opportunity lies. So if the systems today would expose their communities, to this as a career path, then I think you would be surprised as to how many people would buy into that because, uh, you know, I never thought that I could be a paramedic. I never thought that I could be an EMT. Um, and it's ironic because you never know how your life is going to change in an instance. And that's what happened to me. I happened to work as an orderly in a hospital. And I was used to changing beds and putting in Foley catheters and putting people on bedpans and washing men and taking them back. I was content with that until I saw two Freedom House paramedics come in and discharge a patient. And I couldn't take my eyes off of these guys. And it's amazing because they commanded the attention of the room. They didn't have to say anything. They came in, their uniforms were nicely pressed, their total professionalism. They it's ironic they had afros and beards, which was the style back then, and so did I. And I watched these two guys. And once they left, I thought to myself, why can't I do that? And in my mind, I'm an orderly. I change bedpans. I move patients around. How difficult could this job be? So I don't know whether any of you all can identify with this, but I used the yellow pages of the phone book. And I found out where Freedom House's offices were, and I went there. And I walked in, and the guy says, "Can I help you?" I said, "I'm here to apply for a job." And he said, "Okay, that's great." He says, "If I showed you a picture of the heart, would you be able to diagram the circulatory system?" No. Okay. If I showed you the picture of the lungs, would you be able to label the respiratory system? No. Okay, you're not qualified to work here. So when he told me that, what he didn't know and what I didn't know at the time is he unleashed a set of um, motivating, I don't know what you want to call them, opportunities for me at that time, of which somebody told me that I can't do something. What in the world did you tell me that for? So I left there somewhat saddened and went and found a basic first aid course. Went there for 3 months, passed it, took my little certificate back to Freedom House and got hired on the spot. And went and got those nice press white uniforms that drew me to them at the very first time. So it's a matter of exposure that you never know the impact that you're going to have during that time frame. So you have to kind of put forth the effort to do that.
Yeah, so I know that Anisha and I had a conversation earlier about that professionalism. Anisha, do you want to ask your question about that professionalism?
Sure. Nice to meet you, Chief Moon, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, the first time, well, I haven't really, like you're talking about, it's great to talk about seeing people who look like you in this community doing the job you do. So in my area, I didn't see too much of that till I went to EMT school and I met one of my mentors. And like you did say, the way you dress and present yourself to the community did make a difference. How was it for you, I guess, when you started, how you conducted yourself and kept up your attire and your appearance for the community and the different communities you served after you switched from Freedom House to the city?
Well, that's an excellent point because at that particular time where I was stationed, there were no people that looked like me. So every time I walked into a person's home, it's ironic that you said that. The family of the patient always looked to my partner to start talking to them. And it's ironic because I don't know whether services have them at the time. I eventually got promoted to crew chief. So I was in charge of that particular crew. So oftentimes we would go into a home and the residents would look at my partner and say, well, this is wrong and that's wrong. And unbeknownst to them, the partner had to turn around and look back at me to decide what he wanted to do. Okay, what do you say what should we do, Chief? And so that in itself presented a sense of pride, uh, both to me, because it kind of put me in a mindset, okay, I'm at this level. There's a level above that I have to get to. So my position is I never was comfortable at one particular level. I would stay there for a long time, but I had to move up. So I always found out a way to get to the next highest level. And your personal appearance, your interaction with the public, your professionalism, and one of the things that I think plays an important part is your empathy and compassion toward people. And what I did, and I used as a format, is every patient that I took care of, every patient whose home that I went into, I was going to take care of a member of my family. Or I looked at that patient as me. How would I want somebody to treat me when they walked into my house? How would I want them to treat my loved one when they walked into my homes? So if you go into there with that mindset that I'm treating a member of my own family, or I'm treating myself, how would I want someone to treat me? You can't help but offer them the same type of empathy and compassion that your loved one would get or that you want someone to give to you. So your appearance in itself, because remember, as you can agree, the majority of your environments are uncontrolled environments. So it's up to you as that trained professional to bring calmness to chaos. Because when I got a loved one lying there on the floor, they're unconscious, they're writhing in pain, my anxiety level is up to here. So it's up to you to give me that sense of calmness and comfortability and confidence that, okay, everything's going to be all right. I'm the one that's going to take care of your loved one. And you can't be hesitant to do that. It doesn't matter whether it's a white person or a Black person. It's up to that person to make the decision as to whether they want to treat you right or not. And your point's very valid because I experienced racism at that level. We would oftentimes go on calls where the patient would not allow us to touch them, to put the BP cuff on, or to put electrodes on. And so we had to design a psychological approach to that. Okay, since you don't want me to touch you and let me do my job that I'm trained to do, the longer we stay here, your chances of survival starts to decrease because you won't allow me to do what I'm trained to do. And oftentimes they would relent on their thought process of not wanting you to touch them. So it's no two calls are ever the same. I experienced that myself. But if you go in there with empathy and compassion, and remember, you're the professional. So they're looking to you to bring order to that chaos.